Marvel couple, director meets White Queen. Episode 71. Is this the piano of that world? The little boy, that is, Feng, watched all the pictures. What is said in the picture is the X-Men, which has gradually grown up. There was no Feng in that piano world, and there was no huge mutant country, and the war between Magneto and Professor X lasted for many years, and finally because of the birth of the Black Phoenix, all the mutants died. But this is not the fate you should have. Feng smiled, put his hand on the back of the piano's head and slowly pressed it, and said softly, "Wake up, Jean, laugh at." Endless black light spread, and the thick branches and lush leaves were like cocoons, instantly replacing all the black flames in this space. Immediately afterwards, the little girl in front of Feng suddenly raised her head and let out a heart-rending scream. Under the cover of white light, it turned into a palm-sized black phoenix, circled around Feng, turned into black dust, and bloomed into a moving and enchanting flower in the air before disappearing. And Feng once again turned into a stream of light and left this pale space. After he left, crimson flames instantly spread. The dark side that was rejected since childhood disappeared completely. In the desert, the huge black phoenix dissipated. Only Jean Grey, who turned back into a red hare, closed her eyes and fell asleep in the dust. Feng's figure slowly emerged. He squatted down, picked him up, and walked towards the United States thousands of miles away. And the women wearing the headscarves turned to ashes and rushed to meet the Satan they said. 3 days later, somewhere on the outskirts of the city of Massa hideout, under Feng's arrangement, Logan and Laura gathered the mutants scattered elsewhere and brought them to Massa City. To this end, Feng bought a villa in the suburbs, where there is a very large wine cellar that can accommodate many mutants as a habitat. Professor X and others also came to this place. Of course, Feng used some connections to evade the border inspection before bringing them into Massa City unharmed. Due to the large number of mutant deaths, opposition in the United States is growing, and the government has tightened the control of mutants in response to the demands of civilians. Basically, as long as a mutant shows up on the street, he is either arrested by the police and thrown into a shelter, or recognized by the citizens and shot to defend. This is also the trend of the times. Feng was not upset about this, he was already benevolent and righteous. At this time, in a clean bedroom, Jean Grey rubbed her forehead and woke up from the bed. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw a familiar figure standing in front of her. "You finally woke up?" Feng asked softly. "Is there anything else uncomfortable?" Jean slowly shook her head, a trace of dazedness flashed on her face, and said, Why? I can't remember exactly. You. Who are you? We met 3 days ago." Feng smiled at her. Jean Grey's touching and pretty face was slightly stunned, as if remembering everything, and the whole person became silent. Feng noticed this change and said calmly, "No need to repent, you were just being used." "No." Jean shook her head and looked down and said, I killed everyone, no one will blame you." Feng said softly, "Want to meet your old friend? They are alive and waiting for you." Hearing this, Jean Grey's eyes widened and she nodded vigorously. "Follow me." Feng took the initiative to take her hand and walked out of the room. Logan and Caliban and the others happened to be there, and they looked significantly better after returning from the border, at least in terms of food, drink, medicine and other supplies, and they didn't need to worry anymore. Rogan, who was given strength by Feng, was standing in the empty courtyard at this time, waving Edmund's steel claws alive. And Laura, the girl standing next to him, also learned his movements in a similar way, with a fierce expression on her face. It's just that this expression looks a little immature. When Feng appeared with the piano, it almost startled Logan. "My God." Logan sighed heavily, but his eyes were a little apprehensive. "Logan, long time no see." Jean Grey's lips turned pale, and she greeted him with trembling hands. Are you really back?" "Violin?" Logan asked tentatively. "Logan, the piano is not the one you see." Feng spoke lightly and said, "That dark she has completely disappeared, and now she is the kind piano, so you don't have to guard against her." Hearing Feng speak, the jealousy in Logan's eyes finally disappeared, and he smiled at Jean and said, "Welcome home, Jean." Laura, who was listening quietly on the side, also seemed to understand something, and threw herself directly into Jean's arms. "Thank you." Jean's pale look finally eased a lot, and she touched Laura's forehead. "Go, I'll take you to meet the professor. He still has been worried about you in his heart." Logan waved his hand, and the wolf paw instantly retracted, and took Feng and the others to the living room of the villa. Professor X was sitting on the edge of the bed at this time, looking at the scenery outside the window, without saying a word. When Feng and the others stepped into the room, he was sensed almost instantly, and stood up from the chair. "Mr. Feng, you are here." Professor X nodded to Feng, and when he saw the piano beside the ladder, his expression changed instantly. But the professor is always a professor, and soon he saw the clue. His eyes flashed with tears, and said kindly, "Jean, your complexion looks pretty good." Jean was slightly stunned, stared at Professor X's eyes that did not blame at all, nodded with emotion, and said, "Professor, long time no see." Everyone had a tacit understanding and did not mention those sad things. "As long as you're okay." Professor X breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "You have to thank Mr. Li Feng. If it weren't for her, we would never have found you." Jean Grey glanced at Li Feng beside him and nodded slightly to him. Professor Li Feng smiled and asked, "As far as I know, those remaining mutants seem to be children about the same age as Laura?" When Laura heard this, the corners of her mouth skimmed slightly, and she said on the side, "Laura is not small." "Yes." Professor X sighed and said, "They have been arrested by the government's research institute for experiments, and they are psychologically traumatized, and if they are homeless outside, they will definitely become another personality, so I can't give up such new blood." In the words, Professor X did not blame the piano in the slightest. Episode 72. "It's okay, you can stay here for a long time, I'll provide food and resources." Li Feng didn't have any objections, and said, "But you can't stay in this place forever, right?" "You mean?" Professor X looked at Li Feng puzzled. In the room, everyone focused their attention. "If I give you a chance to start over, will you be able to get the mutant school running again?" Li Feng smiled and said amazingly. Everyone in the room looked at each other at this time. "You looked at me, I looked at you," still did not understand what Li Feng meant. Li Feng grinned and said, "What if I told you that I would resurrect all the dead mutants of my kind?" As soon as these words came out, the air in the entire room seemed to freeze, and it instantly became silent. You said. What the? Sheen's face was full of disbelief, and he grabbed Li Feng's arm tightly and said, Can you really bring them back to life?" Li Feng walked into Jean Grey's room, looked at her lying on the bed, and suddenly sounded a crisp prompt sound in his head. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the side quest Save the Daughter of the Phoenix. Get rewarded, Infinity Gauntlet X1. In addition, the host will receive an additional unknown reward X1. Do you want to see the unknown reward immediately? This voice made Li Feng's mind clear up a little. He wasn't really interested in the Infinity Gauntlet, because no matter what, it's just a carrier. If you don't have the Infinity Stones, what do you do with them? Li Feng pondered for a few seconds. Since the system used this as a reward, it naturally made sense, but he really didn't need it now, so he didn't care. What really interested him was this unknown reward. Yes, Li Feng responded in his heart. A second later, ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining Time Gem X1. Hearing this, Li Feng's pupils shrank suddenly. Time gems? As soon as the system prompt fell, a gemstone emitting brilliant green light slowly appeared in the palm of Li Feng's hand. At this moment, he clearly felt that he held the power in his hands that could change everything. This is indeed the real Infinity Stones. Phew! Li Feng suppressed the excitement in his heart and took a long breath. Under the control of his mind, the time gem turned into a green light and burrowed into his forehead. Send the Infinity Stones, don't do it for nothing. Facing everyone's shocked eyes, Li Feng shrugged his shoulders and said, "This is actually not a difficult thing for me." Are you lying to me?" As if frightened, Jean said quickly, "What are you lying to?" Li Feng rolled his eyes. "When I am a 3-year-old, love to lie? Mr. Li Feng, I promise you that as long as you can resurrect all the dead mutants, I will believe in you, worship you, and love you for the rest of my life." Professor X stood up from his chair, bowed heavily to Li Feng, and said, "I do what I say, Charles." "Professor, don't get excited." Li Feng smiled at him and said, "I don't need believers." Professor X coughed awkwardly and said, "Sorry, I'm so excited. Resurrection can be done, but I will do one thing." Li Feng's words turned around and he spoke. "I want all the mutants to forget the existence of Qin, let everyone know her again, except her. Understand what I mean?" Logan and Professor X looked at each other and nodded their heads to indicate that there was no problem. When Qin on the side heard this, a touch of emotion flashed in his eyes, and his tense body relaxed. She knew that Li Feng's purpose in doing this was to let the mutants re-recognize the real her, rather than exist in the shadows of the past. She also knew that the Black Phoenix in her memory was erased by this man. In the past, Jean has suffered countless ostracism to create that dark her. I don't think you know this, right? Li Feng glanced at Professor X and asked, "This?" Said Professor X with a rather ashamed sigh. "To be honest, even though I have strong brainwave control, I can't control the thoughts of these children. I don't blame you." Li Feng spoke. "Human nature is multifaceted, but sin is not." "You're right." Professor X nodded seriously. Li Feng took a deep breath and said, "Are you ready?" "I'm going to start." Something unpredictable could happen here, but don't panic. Everyone focused their heads and looked nervous. Li Feng gently closed his eyes, and under the mobilization of his thoughts, his body was wrapped in a faint green light, and the breath in his body was revived little by little, which actually caused the entire villa to shake slightly. Professor X, Logan, and the others watched this incredible scene, and quickly held the corner of the table on the side to stabilize their figures. Then, they saw Li Feng's eyes suddenly open, shooting out a dazzling green light, and rushing straight into the sky. Even the rays of the sun, as if they were assassins, were covered by this green light. "Resurrect me from the poor mutants buried under the red flames, as well as the dead innocents." Li Feng let out a low roar, and his 5 fingers slammed to the ground. Suddenly, endless green light shot out from inside his body, shrouding the mutants in the entire villa. Professor X and Logan were almost overwhelmed by Li Feng's momentum. The two of them were sweating profusely, their eyes were full of horror, and they looked at Li Feng as if they saw a god. Then, an incredible scene appeared. In Sandy City, the land IQ of the mutant who had long been in ruins, a figure appeared out of thin air from the ground, like a gradually growing grass, raised its head, full of life. The destroyed buildings, as well as the charred corpses, were restored to their original appearance under the influence of the time gem. 10 minutes later, the green light slowly faded. Li Feng's face turned a little pale, and a little cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This was the first time he had used the power of the time gem, and he was somewhat uncomfortable, but he knew that it worked. This is the official live newsroom of Sandy City. Now for your first live report. Just 10 minutes ago, the school of mutants that had become ruins not only returned to its original state, but even those mutants who had died returned to their land alive. This is a scene that has never been seen before in history, and major scientific institutes have sent experts to investigate. Please pay attention to this station to provide you with the first-time report. Episode 73. Inside the room, Professor X and the others all cried with joy. The broadcast in the news, they heard it clearly. They didn't know what means Li Feng used, but they understand that everything has already happened and this is not a dream. Okay, it's time for me to go home. Li Feng stood up, stretched his waist, picked up the coat on the side, draped it over his shoulders, and said to everyone, "If I'm not mistaken, the mutant school should be protected by the government next. You can leave at any time, but remember to close the door before you go. As for political matters, someone should come to me soon to solve it, and you don't have to worry about anything. Go meet the kids, Charles." When the words fell, Li Feng smiled at everyone, turned around and walked towards the door. Before he was about to leave the villa, Jean Grey chased him and stopped him. "Li Feng, Emma, she. Are you okay?" Jean Grey finally remembered Li Feng's identity and asked, "She knows you?" "No, she doesn't know." Li Feng glanced at the moon above his head and said with a smile, "But I did this to not make her sad." "So it is." Jean Grey brushed her red hair and said, "I'll send you." "Send me?" Li Feng opened the Maserati car door, put one hand on the window, looked directly into Jean Grey's eyes, and said, "If you have anything to say, just say it, Jean." The next second, a moist lip gagged. Under the moonlight, the two looked at each other, and after looking at each other for more than 10 seconds, Jean Grey's face turned red, pushed Li Feng away, turned around and walked back to the villa. "Come fast, go fast." Li Feng looked strange and wiped the corners of his mouth. He muttered, "Damn, it's taken advantage of by women." After solving the mutant matter, Li Feng returned to the villa as always. In the past 3 days, he would go home very late, and the White Empress did not blame him, but would wait until Li Feng returned home every night before falling asleep. And of course, Li Feng didn't tell her what happened to the mutant, so he couldn't explain it. After all, such a thing as a time gem should not appear on Earth at the moment. "Honey, did you see the news? As soon as she sat down, the White Queen was full of surprise. "The mutant school has miraculously been restored. All mutants are alive. There must be some powerful presence that saved them." Li Feng deliberately put on a surprised look and responded to her with a smile. The two sat together on the couch and discussed things related to mutants. Looking at the happy smile on the White Queen's face, Li Feng was also satisfied in his heart. He knew that the White Queen was actually reluctant to let those mutant friends who had been with her day and night. Therefore, he did not want to see the White Queen sad. Love is not only sweet, but also accompanied by all kinds of troubles. If these troubles are not dealt with, sooner or later, they will become rotten meat that cannot be eliminated. "By the way, husband, I heard on the internet that you seem to have appeared near the White House recently. Are you going to talk about business?" The White Queen put a cherry in her mouth and suddenly asked curiously. Li Feng's heart was shocked, and he smiled. "What's wrong?" Suddenly ask this? He couldn't have told the White Queen that he had gone to kill the President of the United States, right? "Nothing, just ask." The White Queen rested her head on Li Feng's shoulder and said, "You know what? The chairman of Stark Group recently announced that he turned out to be Iron Man." "Oh?" Li Feng pretended to be curious. "Iron Man? Is that the one in the red armor?" "Yes, you know too?" The White Queen smiled and said, "I remember the last time you told me that you got investment from Tony Stark, right? After he announced the incident, he sent a party invitation to our house, as if he wanted us to go to Stark Mansion to celebrate. Are you going?" Tony has maintained relatively close contact with Li Feng during this time, and the two are now good friends. Occasionally there are some parties and the like. Tony will invite Li Feng to go together, but Li Feng often didn't have time to refuse. After all, he didn't want to be involved too much with people from S.H.I.E.L.D. "The crew still has a lot of films waiting for me to shoot. In addition to work is to accompany you. Where can I have leisure to go to the party?" Li Feng smiled and took the White Queen into his arms and said, "Let's ignore that playboy. Listen to you. The White Queen smiled movingly, slightly well-behaved. The next day, after the two had breakfast, Li Feng left the villa first. As for the White Queen, she walked to the bedroom, looked at the mirror, and said calmly, "Come out, I know you are coming." As soon as the words fell, a queen wrapped in a noble and graceful coat walked out of the mirror. Mother of the Nine Realms, wife of Odin, Frigga. Yes, Asgard has found where Hela is. This is because Hela's power is reviving day by day, and Heimdall receives the sense. It is not unusual for Frigga to be able to find a villa. "Hela, my daughter, are you doing well?" Frigga had a soft face and raised her hand to touch the White Queen's face. "You're not my mother." Looking at Frigga, Hela spoke coldly. Although the tone was a little blunt, there was not much hostility. After all, Frigga is also the one who watched her grow up. Moreover, as the mother of the Nine Realms, Frigga has always been kind-hearted and has forgiven countless aliens who may die in the battle of the God Realm. If Odin had come here, Hela wouldn't have said a word at all. Perhaps, he will start fighting directly. "Odin is your father, and I am your mother." Frigga took the White Queen's hand, looked at her with distress, and said, "My daughter, why are you not in your divine body, but in a mortal body? What's the problem?" Hela was still indifferent, as if in front of her was not a relative who raised her, but a stranger. "I like Emma, her personality is the same as mine, we share the same body, there is no conflict." "Kid, you have a good eye." Frigga still looked kind and said to Hela, "Mother has never questioned your choice, but you should know that if you recover your strength and do not return to the divine body, you will always be immortal. Is there any difference between mortals and gods?" Hela sneered, with disgust in her eyes. "I have fought for Asgard for tens of thousands of years, what have I gained? Dear mother, have you forgotten?" Episode 74. My daughter, Frigga sighed, stroking her hand, and said, "Your father never listened to me. That's why I secretly came to this planet to meet you. Asgard already knows that you are in love with the mortals of Earth. Your father Odin is angry about this. I'm afraid it won't be long before he comes to you. You need to be more careful." When Hela heard this, her face became even colder, and the killing intent boiled in the room. She withdrew her hand and said coldly, "He is not my father. He is just a hypocritical bastard, a treacherous bastard who kills donkeys." Hela would have come this far, mostly thanks to Odin. When it comes to who Hela hates the most, it is Odin. However, Frigga's words still made Hela heart, knowing that Asgard had now begun to set his sights on Li Feng. This gave Hela a headache. It's not that she doesn't know how arrogant the group of Asgardians really is, and erasing a mortal is actually nothing to Asgard. Although, Hela herself is also an arrogant guy, who makes her really like Li Feng. "Alright, my daughter." Frigga sighed, stood up, poured her into his arms, and said, "Mother is happy that you have found someone you love. You need to be more careful and live with him." After speaking, Frigga said a word to Hela, then got into the mirror and disappeared. This is just a doppelganger that Frigga had Heimdall projection, not her personal presence. Otherwise, you can't hide Odin. Asgard will not be indifferent to Hela's affairs, that's for sure. In Asgard's view, Hela and a mortal union form a family, which is an insult to Asgard's glory. Odin, this stodgy and stubborn guy, couldn't wait to eat Li Feng alive. But what exactly he will do, no one knows. After leaving the villa, Li Feng received a call on the way. The call was from Tony Stark, but the voice on the other end was Nick Fury. He claimed that the president had been resurrected and wanted to talk to Li Feng, hoping that he could come to Stark Tower to meet him. Li Feng hesitated and did not refuse. After all, no matter how you say it, the guy of the President of the United States also killed himself. Although he was resurrected, S.H.I.E.L.D. did not publicize the matter. I have to say that Nick Fury has been mixed up for so many years, and he is no worse than anyone in terms of judging the situation. If after the death of the President of the United States, Nick Fury directly asked the military to surround Li Feng, then this phone call and the next meeting would not have happened. After driving for several hours on the highway, Li Feng finally came to Tony's villa. By the time Li Feng arrived, the party had already begun. Looking at Tony, who was surrounded by a group of supermodels, Li Feng couldn't help but shake his head. This playboy is really dashing in life. If Li Feng hadn't known the White Queen, it was estimated that he would not be able to get out of the pile of women at this time. In addition to Tony, Li Feng also saw some other acquaintances, all of whom were characters who had appeared in the movie, such as War Machine, which is Tony's military friend. Another example is Tony's personal bodyguard, Harry. Even Li Feng saw Black Widow and Hawkeye, two members of the original Avengers, who were actually here. This made Li Feng a little puzzled, but soon he was relieved. It is estimated that at this point in time, coupled with the impact of the mutant personnel change, the establishment of the Avengers should have been successfully deployed. Even Li Feng was originally in Nick Fury's plan, but as Li Feng and Hela continued to show their strength, Nick Fury has also dismissed this plan. Can't afford to mess with these two big guys, really can't afford to mess with them. However, Nick Fury is still not dead, and today's party can be regarded as a temptation for Nick Fury. On the surface, when he was the President of the United States, he asked Li Feng to come over and ask for clarification, but in fact, he was in order to further establish good relations with him. After all, Nick Fury had just called a group of soldiers in front of the White House not long ago to block Li Feng. Even if it is not good to tell Li Feng clearly and invite Li Feng to join, it is not wrong to have a good relationship with Li Feng first. What does it mean that this person dares to break into the White House single-handedly, and he is not even afraid of Thor? Doesn't it mean that it is stronger than Thor? After guessing a little of Nick Fury's thoughts, Li Feng did not resist much. Don't look at the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D is like a licking dog in front of him now, humble to the extreme. Once he has some kind of crazy idea, the entire National Defense Force will target him. However, this is fine. It is better to let S.H.I.E.L.D be its own licking dog than to be a S.H.I.E.L.D licking dog. Enemies and friends, naturally the latter is better. Li Feng's arrival soon became the center of this party. The surrounding supermodels and celebrities who were invited to come all came to toast Li Feng. After all, now he is already a semi-top existence in the directing world. Tony welcomed Li Feng warmly, and even began to introduce Li Feng to supermodels. Those supermodels also looked at Li Feng's eyes one by one, just like a pack of wolves saw a piece of fat meat. Li Feng's attraction is still great, his appearance is handsome, and his figure is explosive. Moreover, he is a top director who has been particularly famous recently, and has a lot of influence in the world. Such a young man is simply the perfect other half object. If they can get the favor of this director, they will definitely get countless benefits and resources, and maybe they can become the heroines in a certain movie. For the thoughts of these supermodels, Li Feng knows it well. The more high-class parties and gatherings, the more scarce the resources. These supermodels desperately want to get close to Tony. Isn't it just to be able to get the little resources that Tony gave out? Unfortunately, Li Feng already had a white queen. No matter how beautiful these supermodels are, they don't enter his eyes. Hey, Li Feng, don't you have the color you like? Tony came to Li Feng's side and said to Li Feng in the tone of a person who came over. No, I'm too tired today, I'm not in the mood. Li Feng smiled and didn't explain too much. The two do not talk about the difference in aesthetics, even the personalities are very different. Who is Tony? The rich second generation, who grew up in a good environment provided by his parents, standard playboys, who are neither short of money nor of people, linger in the flowers every day. Who is Li Feng? Nearly a year ago, he was still in a rental house, worrying about the daily life, and 996 gave his life to the company. Looking at Tony's posture, I am afraid that I wish I had 48 hours a day to waste and use it for pleasure. Episode 75. But Li Feng is different. He cherishes the current time very much. If it is not a particularly necessary person or thing, he does not want to waste time on it. Of course, it's not that Tony is the kind of person who doesn't seek advancement. Now Tony is still very young. I'm afraid it won't be until a few years later, after a series of events, that Tony transforms his mentality and becomes a qualified superhero. At that time, Tony was the one Li Feng admired. The current Tony is, at best, just a child who has not grown up. Different personalities, different philosophies. You shouldn't be so desperate. How sad do you see those girls? Tony put his arm around a touching woman and said, their bed work is more than you think, is it? Then you have to enjoy it. Li Feng smiled and patted his butt and said, I hope you won't be unable to walk tomorrow. After a few more words with Tony quickly left, turned around and plunged into the flowers, holding a few supermodels and walking towards the corner where no one was. In this regard, Li Feng did not have any envy, but felt that Tony was a little naive. After Tony left, Li Feng wanted to look for Nick Fury, but did not see him at the party. And at this moment, Natasha and Hawkeye found Li Feng and walked up together. How's it going? Genius director. Natasha smiled at Li Feng, with a hint of hidden resentment in her eyes. This female agent, who had planned to seduce Li Feng, was still a little unwilling when she faced Li Feng again at this time. She couldn't figure out how any man would not like a goddess of her level. Li Feng is such a person. Not bad, Natasha, when are you going to go back to my company to work for me? Li Feng also laughed and teased. As long as it was not with a purpose, he did not refuse to say more to Natasha. My agent said that he misses you very much. You can't afford to pay me. Natasha covered her mouth and chuckled, pointed to Barton on the side and said, Introduction. This is our new member of S.H.I.E.L.D. Hawkeye, like me, is also a level 10 agent. He is very interested in you. Director Li Feng, you can call me Barton. Hawkeye stretched out his right hand to Li Feng, quite familiarly. Nice to meet you. Li Feng did not have any disgust for Hawkeye, said hello, and they knew each other. Hawkeye is one of the Avengers veterans and a senior agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. The main thing is that Hawkeye and Li Feng are really similar. Hawkeye also has a family, has his own lover, and even has children. Like Li Feng, Hawkeye is also a person who is very loyal to his family. After chatting with Hawkeye for a few words, Li Feng and Hawkeye had a good conversation, and their friendship with each other made rapid progress. Even Hawkeye invited Li Feng to have the opportunity to visit his home to enhance their relationship. Li Feng said that there was no problem, and Hawkeye and Natasha turned and left. In fact, Li Feng's personality is really relatively easygoing, and his ruthlessness is just for treating enemies. For those Avengers members who want to make friends with themselves from a normal point of view, he will not ignore it. Not long after, when Li Feng planned to go back, Nick Fury was late. Still wearing that black trench coat, he nodded to Li Feng and motioned for him to come with him. The two took the elevator together to the top floor of the Stark building. Here, there is a very large bar and soft sofas. On the table in front of the sofa, a familiar hammer stood. A guy in a cape, holding a bottle of whiskey in his hand, fell on the sofa, drunkenly talking nonsense. In front of the floor-to-ceiling window next to it, there is a strong man in ordinary casual clothes. It is Steve Rogers of the American team. The name of the American team was made into the real world's real name. Don't be angry with the audience. In addition, there was a familiar figure that made Li Feng raise his eyebrows slightly. Dr. Banner. He was actually there? He was also wearing a white coat, and in front of the console that Tony Stark often operated, he was intently doing some experiments. Come here. Nick Fury snapped his fingers at everyone and gathered them together in front of the sofa. This is the Li Feng I told you. You basically met. It doesn't matter if it's Rogers, or Banner, or Thor. Nick Fury said to everyone with a calm expression. Li Feng, you really came. I thought they were just joking. Dr. Banner smiled and nodded to Li Feng, his face visibly excited. Then, he took out a card, handed it to Li Feng, and said, I have to thank you for helping me in the first place. I haven't touched a cent of the money in this card. I work for S.H.I.E.L.D. now, and get paid every month. Li Feng did not push the bank card back, and reached into his pocket. He looked at Nick Fury. Say, what's the matter with calling me here? The latter did not speak, but glanced at the American team. The American team walked to Li Feng and sat down, poured him a glass of wine, and said seriously, Li Feng, we hope that you will join the Avengers, an organization established to protect human security, and S.H.I.E.L.D. will be our backing. As a sign of sincerity, the role of captain of the Avengers will be assumed by you, and in addition to that, your life will continue as usual. Oh? Is it? Li Feng was not surprised by this, as expected, and said lightly, sorry, I'm really not interested. Don't rush to refuse yet. Nick Fury took the conversation and said, Li Feng, do you know that your killing of the President of the United States in the White House has been recorded and even transmitted to the internet? If it weren't for S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intelligence system being very powerful, intercepting these videos and avoiding revealing your identity, you would definitely be arrested by now, and in the worst case, you would have been sent to the execution table. What do you want to say? Li Feng narrowed his eyes. You are strong, there is no denying that. Nick Fury shrugged his shoulders and said, but you know, if you have this layer of S.H.I.E.L.D. in place, the next time you strike again, you don't need to worry so much. Nick, I've always thought of you as a smart person, but you don't seem to think I'm a smart person. Li Feng sneered, looked directly into his eyes, and said, let me guess, has the President of the United States been resurrected? That's why you invited me here, called so many people, and threw me an olive branch? Episode 76. Nick Fury's eyes flickered for 2 seconds, and he nodded slightly. Then you haven't wondered why that guy was resurrected? After saying this, Li Feng stood up, patted his butt, and turned to leave. Nick Fury, Rogers, and the others looked at each other, and they all saw a strong incredulity in each other's eyes. Wait. Just as Li Feng was about to walk to the elevator, a drunken voice stopped him. Thor got up from the sofa, took a deep breath, looked at Li Feng, and said, why, can you hold Mjolnir? Tell me, why? Li Feng glanced back at him, shook his head with a smile, did not stay any longer, turned around and left. He knew that what happened that day in the White House was a difficult thing for Thor, who had always been strong, to accept, but he wouldn't explain that much, because it wasn't necessary. Damn it. Thor watched Li Feng leave and smashed the wine bottle in his hand, a little indignant. Thor, calm down. Rogers gave him a look and said, he's not a nice guy. Of course I know he's not a good person to mess with, he sucked most of my Thor power away. Thor said drunkenly, if it weren't for Mjolnir's hammer still in my hands, I wouldn't be able to go back to Asgard in my life. Since he doesn't want to join S.H.I.E.L.D., don't force him for the time being. Nick Fury sighed, his eyes deep, and if the President of the United States and those mutants were resurrected by him, I think things would have happened. Hearing this, everyone's eyes became solemn. At this time, Li Feng did not know that the Avengers, formed by S.H.I.E.L.D., had listed him as a character on the dangerous list. Although Nick Fury told everyone not to approach Li Feng casually, this did not prevent everyone from being on guard against him. This party Li Feng finally left quickly. In addition to meeting a few S.H.I.E.L.D. friends, he also had a windfall. It was from Tony's mouth that he got an important news. Thor's main purpose in coming to Earth this time is to find his sister, that is, the legendary goddess of death, Hela, the first heir to the throne of Asgard. And Tony also kindly reminded Li Feng that this goddess named Hela is likely to be in his wife Emma. This made Li Feng's whole person a little confused. How is this possible? Li Feng thought in his heart, always feeling a little unreal. It is already a lucky thing for the White Queen to become her wife. How can Hela of Asgard be in her body? But if that's the case, It seems that everything is explained, including the White Queen's personality changes from time to time. Li Feng took a deep breath, not knowing whether he was lucky or unlucky. Assuming that is the case, how do you face the White Queen? As before, get along day and night, as if it didn't happen? Or a showdown with the White Queen? He wasn't sure what the outcome of either choice would be, although Li Feng's heart was more inclined to the second, because he didn't know why Hela was in the body of the White Queen. But in the end, Li Feng still pressed this idea. Since the White Queen has been with him for so long and has not taken the initiative to tell him about Hela's existence, then there must be some kind of intention in it. Li Feng knew that he didn't need to worry, because he clearly understood that the White Queen loved him deeply. He believed that sooner or later the White Queen would take the initiative to confess to herself. But in addition to these, what Li Feng also needs to consider is the follow-up trouble. Thor has already joined S.H.I.E.L.D, and I believe that it will not be long before Hela's secret in the body of the White Queen will reach Asgard's ears. With Li Feng's understanding of the plot of Thor, whether it is Odin or Thor, there will inevitably be a grand war with Hela. So when the time comes, which side will Li Feng be on? Perhaps he will also fight Asgard? Although with Li Feng's current strength, there is no need to worry about this. Among all the people in Asgard, except for Odin, the main god, who made him a little jealous, the others were nothing in Li Feng's eyes. Therefore, Li Feng quickly adjusted his mentality. Anyway, the White Queen is her wife, and Hela in her body has also done something indescribable with herself. With such a relationship, even if Hela wants to lead thousands of troops back to Asgard, Li Feng will not hesitate to become a solid sword and shield behind her. Thinking about it like this, Li Feng suddenly found that he was quite conscious. His wife led thousands of troops back to Asgard, and then was conquered in bed by herself? Hey. Li Feng stepped on the accelerator and quickly rushed towards his home in Masa City. Wife, I'm back. At this time, United States, Ministry of Defense, Military Space Agency. Here, an agency founded by the Department of Defense in collaboration with S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, mainly conducts some research on military aspects such as space meteorites, visions, and comets. At about 10 o'clock this evening, in the General Control Room of the Military Space Administration, several astronauts in charge of duty, as if they had been hit by a body-fixing technique, looked at the huge screen in front of them with a dull face. Everyone's eyes are wrapped in intense despair and the overwhelm derived from giant phobia. Among them, Deputy Director Paul was also at the scene. Looking at the picture on the screen, Paul swallowed a mouthful of spit, his eyes full of despair and dead silence. Because, on the big screen in front of him, a huge black shadow is constantly approaching the Earth. He sat on the ground with his butt trembling all over. As Paul, who has studied astronautics for nearly half of his life, he naturally understands what this black shadow means. This is a black hole. Moreover, it is a black hole millions of times larger than known black holes. It is no exaggeration to call it the ultimate celestial body in the universe. In other words, this huge black hole, if it wants to devour the Earth, I am afraid it will not even need a second. Disaster is coming. A disaster even more terrifying than hundreds of millions of years ago, when a comet hit Earth. Under the black hole, everything will be eaten away and completely disappear into the universe. United States, White House, Office of the President. With the resurrection of the President of the United States, part of his memory was also taken away by the dead apocalypse, and the rest of his life did not let him change his problem of using Twitter to govern the country. At this time he was sitting in the office, holding his mobile phone and constantly swiping messages. When encountering some interesting messages, the President of the United States will also give them a thumbs up. Assuming that the person who likes is his supporter, he will press the reply button and type a few words. Episode 77. In his eyes, this is spiritual food. Just as the president was about to threaten the small countries with a tweet to satisfy his desires, the door of the room was suddenly pushed open by the defense minister. Hey, you should knock first. Did I allow you in? The US president cursed while turning off the screen of his mobile phone. Sorry, Mr. President, something happened. The Minister of Defense took out a tablet and placed it on his desktop and said in a deep voice, "The Ministry of Military Aviation has sent a video. I think you need to take a look." Ministry of Aviation? Again the Ministry of Aviation? The President of the United States smiled disdainfully and said, "Not long ago, these guys also sent me a document, saying that there are aliens coming outside the Earth. Let me increase their military spending to resist future Star Wars. I see that they have watched Star Wars too much, and this childish idea will appear. The United States uses so much financial funds in the military every year. If we give these funds to those civilians, those capitalists, our country will become better and better. What do you think?" Minister of Defense. The President of the United States complained mercilessly. "Yes, you're right. However, I think you should watch the video first." The Minister of Defense was expressionless and said, Okay, isn't it just a video? I tell you, after I read it, I will definitely not meet your requirements. Sure. The president picked up the tablet and pressed the play button. Just the more he looked, the more solemn his face became. In the end, his palms shook, and the tablet fell directly to the ground. Quick! Notify S.H.I.E.L.D. It's over. Our country is finished. The whole world is finished. Go quickly. You fucking fellow. The President of the United States is going crazy. He really can't believe what he sees. Unfortunately, the cruel truth was in front of him, so he couldn't believe it. A huge black hole is slowly coming towards the Earth and has passed the Sun. According to the speed of its travel, in less than 2 days, the Earth will be completely involved in the gravity of this black hole and ruthlessly swallowed. This is a disaster even more terrifying than the extinction of the Jurassic 65 million years ago. Not only in the White House office, but also after returning to S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury also learned the news. Seeing the video and reports sent by the military, Nick Fury's forehead also broke out in cold sweat. What is this? Doomsday? At this moment, even if Nick Fury is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., a man with countless experiences, he is completely panicked at this time. Those eyes that were usually full of determination, but at the moment they were all confused and panicked. He didn't know what to do, how to deal with this crisis. The usual strategizing has now become a joke. He had never been in such a predicament. Although he formed the Avengers, they could not resist the black hole. This celestial body is the most terrifying existence in known science. What's more, its volume is still so large. Not to mention him, all life on Earth added up, in front of black holes, looks extremely small. This is not at all an existence that human beings can confront. At this time, a figure popped up in Nick Fury's head. He ran into the office like crazy, opened the safe, flipped through a key machine, and held it in his hand. Kree, Captain Marvel. Currently on Earth, Nick Fury is the strongest known existence. At the same time, it is also the biggest killer tool and the greatest confidence in his life. Once used, there are no other opportunities. But now, he has no retreat and no choice. Nick Fury hesitated for a long time, and finally used this button machine to send a message to Captain Marvel. Carol, you must come. Asgard, main temple. Above the throne, Odin is closing his eyes and pondering, thinking back to his bravery in the past battles. At this moment, Heimdall walked in quickly. Your Majesty, something happened. Heimdall's face was full of anxiety, which he rarely showed on his face. What's going on? Thor is in trouble again? No, it has nothing to do with Thor. Heimdall took a deep breath and replied. Star Swallow, one of the 5 great gods, used his essence and entered the galaxy. Based on his trajectory, it is very likely that his purpose is the planet where your son and your daughter are currently located. Earth. Heimdall's insight is naturally not comparable to that of humans. He has the eye of God, so he can see at a glance that the one that is constantly approaching the Earth is not a black hole at all, but a more terrifying existence. One of the 5 founding gods, the planet devourer. A guy who disgusts all races in the universe, a madman. For Star Swallower, the purpose of his survival in the universe is to devour those garbage planets that have no role in the universe. Swallow Star, wasn't this guy just warned by the OAA not long ago? How dare you use your body to walk wantonly in the universe? Odin also narrowed his eyes and frowned when he heard the news. This is no joke. Although Star Swallowing is at the bottom of the 5 great gods of the universe, he has existed in the universe for nearly hundreds of millions of years. In these hundreds of millions of years, the planet it devoured has provided countless nutrients for the growth of his body. As the god king of Asgard, Odin is well aware of the horror of devouring stars. Star Swallowing in his heyday, or Star Swallowing on the way to eat, but even he had to temporarily avoid the limelight. What kind of wind is this Star Swallower, and actually has an idea about the Earth? The Milky Way is the most mysterious galaxy in the universe, and he has been so bold in teleporting his body that he must have not eaten for a long time. Heimdall. Odin raised his scepter and shouted. Yes. Heimdall bowed his head slightly. Take a look with your god eyes. Has the cosmic celestial god group made an appearance in the galaxy? Your Majesty. Heimdall shook his head and said, I had already probed before I came, and the cosmic celestial god group has not appeared in the galaxy since it appeared once 37 million years ago. Do they want to watch a civilization being eaten by the devouring star? Odin narrowed his eyes, a hint of concern on his face. The most powerful organization in the universe, or management group, is definitely none other than the cosmic celestial god group. This organization that does things everywhere often uses the balance of the universe as an excuse to play the role of a cosmic police officer, exiling planets that do not follow the rules and wantonly exploit the resources of the universe. But at the critical time, how did the people of the cosmic celestial god group disappear? Episode 78. But if you think about it, it's not surprising. After all, the relationship between the 5 great gods of the universe and the founder of the universe god group is not ordinary. In this case, the possibility of the celestial god group going to find trouble with star devouring is very small. The Earth is such a small planet, in Odin's eyes is nothing. In the eyes of those cosmic god groups that often wander in the universe, nature is destruction and destruction. I'm afraid I don't care much, right? Just when Odin was still struggling with whether to take the risk to stop the star swallowing, there were also people on Earth who looked out of the sky. In front of the Himalayas, Karmataj, Furuchi, who wore the time gem around his neck, stood on the top of the mountain, looking at the sky above his head with solemn eyes. As the guardian of the Earth and the defender of the dark forces, Furuchi has repelled countless dark beings who have wanted to take the Earth for themselves in the long years. But this time, here came one of the 5 great gods of the universe. This is probably an even more terrifying existence than Dormammu, the Lord of the Dark Dimension, Planet Devourer. This level of existence is an unattainable god for every creature on the earth, and in the eyes of the earthlings swallowing stars, they are not even ants. Thinking of this, Furuchi sighed again. Now the only way is to try to use the power of the time gem to stop this monster. In this way, there is still a chance to fight, otherwise you can only wait for death. Wait. A figure suddenly appeared in Gui's mind. Perhaps, can he stop this catastrophe? Yes. Gui thought of Li Feng. In the mirror space before, Gui had seen Li Feng's strength. Even she, the supreme mage who had lived for hundreds of years, didn't know where Li Feng's power came from. The biggest possibility is that it does not belong to this planet. Maybe, this person named Li Feng has a chance to compete with star swallowing and become a key player in saving this disaster? Gui was not sure that she would not go to find Li Feng because of this, let alone use the time gem to advance the future. She decided to wait. Wait for Li Feng to make his own choice. Or rather, wait for those who have the power to save this disaster to show up. If at the most critical moment, if not, she will dedicate herself through the gem of time. In the villa in Masa City, after Li Feng sent the White Queen out, he took a deep breath and sat on the sofa. His face looked a little solemn. He did not expect that the swallowing star would descend to the Milky Way so soon. Although as soon as the apocalypse died, he had a hunch that the star swallowing would come sooner or later. But too fast, still too fast. As early as when the star-swallowing star broke through the boundary wall of the galaxy, Li Feng used the perception of the apocalypse star to discover the existence of the star-swallowing star. Should I make a move? Li Feng was thinking. It is estimated that it will not be long before the swallowing star will cross the sun and envelop the earth. If he doesn't make a move, there is simply no one else on this earth who can save this disaster. Because as far as these superheroes on Earth are concerned, there is obviously no existence that can fight against star swallowing. Iron Man? Even the Mark 34 has not yet been created. How to fight it? Hulk? Now he has only begun to adapt to his strength, and he is not far from the four-handed form. Thor? It is still necessary to rely on the power of Mjolnir to stimulate their potential, let alone the awakening of the power of Thor. Scarlet Witch? People haven't appeared yet, the devil knows where it is now. As for Gu-E, Hela, and Captain Marvel, although the strength of the three of them is very strong, according to the current timeline, they are definitely not the opponents of star swallowing. Because the star swallowing that came to the earth at this moment is not a doppelganger, but the entire body. The ontology of one of the 5 great gods of the universe is enough to explain everything. After thinking about it, Li Feng found that the only person who could prevent this disaster seemed to be himself. In fact, the life and death of the earthlings did not affect him. But on this planet, there are still people you love, people you want to protect. If he allows disaster to come and leave it alone, then everything he has now will disappear. This made Li Feng feel a little helpless, and the heroes were forced out. He stood up and moved his bones, covering his body with a layer of black light. The power of the symbiote god made his figure expand several times. He decided to strike. If this is not done, countless living beings will become star-swallowing food, and his beloved White Queen also can't escape this disaster. At this moment, the White Queen, who was staying in the hospital to take care of her unconscious biological mother, like the vast majority of Earthlings, did not know what Li Feng was going to do next, let alone the arrival of star swallowing. She is not like Gu-E, who has the blessing of the time gem, and even less like S.H.I.E.L.D, who has the divine eye of Heimdall. Without enough sources of intelligence, Hela could not spread her spiritual power into the universe. Of course, if she returned to her divine body, she might be aware of it. But now she is only a soul body at best, and her strength has not yet returned to its heyday. At most, through the Hydra organization, I learned that a black hole was about to approach the Earth. This is a completely trivial matter in Hela's eyes. Perhaps ordinary mortals will be scared to pee their pants when they find out. After all, black holes are a mysterious and inexplicable disaster in their eyes. But Hela knew that those powerful beings on Earth would certainly not allow this disaster to happen. If nothing else, just Odin and Supreme Mage Gu-E, 2 bigwigs with Heavenly Father-level power, can be easily solved. Hela cares more about another thing, Odin's conspiracy. Through Frigga's arrival, Hela already knows that Asgard has discovered her, and that Odin is planning to break up her and Li Feng. That's really nothing. From the moment Hela entered the White Queen's body, she knew there would be such a day. Asgard's position in the entire 9 realms is such that unless she hides in the chaotic universe outside the 9 realms, sooner or later she will be discovered by Heimdall. Therefore, she had to worry about what dangerous move Odin would make in order to catch her. In the eyes of Hela, or the White Queen, although Li Feng is very talented in directing, he is still an unarmed ordinary Earth human. If he encounters a powerful main god like Odin, I am afraid that he will not even be able to live for half a second, and he will be shattered by the divine power in his body. Moreover, she clearly knew that Odin was a lord god with a sense of honor in his family, and he would never allow his descendants to marry those low-level inhumans. Because in Odin's eyes, this is defiling the bloodline of the Lord of the 9 realms. But, so what? Hela never felt that it was a shame to fall in love with an Earthling. In the past 10,000 years, all her focus has been on the battlefield, and the so-called love is an unattainable existence in her eyes. But now, she can be said to have met the love of her life. It was Li Feng. Episode 79. If Odin dared to make a move against Li Feng, she would definitely not hesitate to use all her strength to burn her jade. This is the goddess of death, caught in love. Hela has put Li Feng in a particularly important position in his heart. After all, where Odin's strength is, in the entire 9 realms, almost no one can compete with him, which is not a threat to Li Feng, but a disaster. It is conceivable that if Odin really killed Li Feng in front of her, then she would definitely fall into a complete madness like the White Queen. A goddess of death who has lost her beloved will no longer be just a mere goddess. Therefore, Hela was thinking in the White Queen's heart at this time, how to ensure Li Feng's life safety as much as possible. Both of them had the same concerns about Li Feng. Of course, the reason for this situation is mainly because he does not understand Li Feng's strength. If the White Queen and Hela knew that Li Feng was powerful now, they would definitely not have the confusion they had now. After all, the current Li Feng not only has a symbiote god that can modify all genes, but even has such a powerful existence as the Steppenwolf template, which is not worth anyone. At this time, with the warning issued by the military's aviation department, those high-ranking human beings who knew the truth had fallen into despair and dead silence. Their hearts were dead and they gave up their struggle. Yes, there is no need to struggle. The so-called nuclear weapons have no effect at all in the face of a black hole of the level of swallowing stars. The more powerful the existence, the easier it is to make people fearful. The militaries of the countries of the Earth tacitly concealed this matter. They are not going to reveal the truth to any civilian because it doesn't make any sense. Although some of them were more crazy attackers, who offered to launch nuclear bombs to cause damage to star swallowing, no one was willing to listen to them. The end of the Earth has truly come. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury did not give up the struggle like most people. After notifying Captain Marvel, he immediately gathered all the members of the Avengers and found a way to contact the X-Men, as well as the Fantastic Four and others. Among them, Tony Stark, who was preparing to travel, immediately drove to S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters after getting the news. As for the Fantastic Four, after communicating with the military, they also chose to obey the orders of S.H.I.E.L.D. without hesitation. As for the X-Men led by Professor X, after returning to the mutant school, they hurried to the capital of the United States. They were ready to die, because everyone feels that mankind is dead this time. In the face of the black hole, the superheroes who are still immature today have no power to resist at all, but they don't want to give up. Li Feng naturally didn't know these things, let alone that most of the governments on the Earth had given up their struggles. At this time, he was constantly jumping in midair, and came to the atmosphere at an extremely terrifying liftoff speed. With just a few more jumps, he was able to easily enter space. Although he doesn't have wings, the Steppenwolf dog template and the god of symbiotes can completely rewrite his genes and adapt him to the environment in space. Moreover, with every jump, he was able to increase his speed by a notch, and even break through supersonic speed. This was also the result of Li Feng's deliberate control of his speed, otherwise he would probably burn the clothes on his body if he was too fast. Rao is so, Li Feng still left the Earth's orbit in a very short time and officially entered the realm of outer space. Between the Sun and the Earth, a huge black vortex, like a huge pupil, slowly moved forward in the solar system. If the Earthlings see this scene, they will understand that this black domain is the biggest threat facing the Earth today, the black hole. To be exact, it is one of the 5 gods, the planet devourer itself. At a glance, it makes people's hearts palpitate. After breaking through the atmosphere and entering the sky, Li Fenghuan's body was covered with a layer of silver-white translucent armor, which looked like a venom in combat form, which was the complete form of the symbiote god. This is the star-swallowing body? Li Feng took a deep breath. Just as he was about to approach this palpitating giant star, a silver figure suddenly appeared in his field of vision, shuttling through the endless pitch-black space at a terrifying speed of nearly the 3rd cosmic speed. This is... Li Feng recognized this figure almost instantly. Who else but the Silver Shadow guy who can fly freely in space on a skateboard? It's just that at this time, Silver Shadow Man is still a subordinate under Star Swallowing, and after being washed of his memory, he became a villainer. At this moment, the Silver Shadow Man set his eyes on the Earth and also found Li Feng's figure. He frowned slightly, manipulated the skateboard under his feet, and levitated. The two looked at each other without any unnecessary communication. Symbiote? The Silver Shadow Man recognized the armor covered by Li Feng's body. How can symbionts appear on Earth? The two sides are not like those science fiction movies. You and I ask each other about the origin, because this is the space of fruit dew, and sound waves cannot travel at all. The two looked at each other like this for tens of seconds, and the Silver Shadow Man seemed to sense something that was not quite right, and directly rushed towards Li Feng. And Li Feng, without any hesitation, directly used the power of all the Steppenwolf templates. This time into space, he is not for fun, but to protect the people he loves. So there is no need to talk. Fighting directly is what should be done. Bang! The moment the two collided together, a ray containing terrifying energy burst out from the center of Silver Shadow Man's chest. This energy ray is the unique power given to him by the swallowing star, which can not only easily penetrate any meteorite in the universe, but also instantly annihilate the life form with cells. There was no doubt that if Li Feng did not have the symbiote god template, this ray could easily penetrate his body. But the god of symbiote can not only rewrite genes, but also devour energy and assimilate energy. When the ray touched Li Feng's body, it was instantly dissolved by the silver-white armor. When the Silver Shadow Man saw this scene, his pupils shrank slightly. From the perspective of the division of forces in the universe, his strength can reach the level of the Heavenly Father, or even higher. Because Star Swallowing did not skimp on his power, he was given a terrifying cosmic-level power as a reward for him to use. Although in the movie, Silver Shadow Man and Fantastic Four and others teamed up to swallow stars, the price paid was only the same. But you know, that's not all the energy of swallowing star. Episode 80. If one of the 5 great gods of the universe was really so easy to kill, then this universe would have ceased to exist a long time ago. Therefore, at this time, the strength of the Silver Shadow Man must not be underestimated. It's just that he met such a pervert as Li Feng. Just a template for Steppenwolf was enough to make Li Feng's strength reach an exaggerated point. After all, this was a real member of the Apocalypse Star New God clan. In addition, there is a symbiote god template, and it is the strongest existence of all venoms. If this thing is used well, Li Feng can easily rewrite any gene to make himself stronger. The limits in space were close to zero for him. Therefore, in the face of the cosmic ray emitted from the chest of the Silver Shadow Man, Li Feng did not even dodge, and directly ignored this ray. When the ray was devoured by the symbiote god, Li Feng not only did not suffer damage, but felt that his body was a little stronger. Subsequently, die, Li Feng sneered, and under the panicked look of the Silver Shadow Man, he suddenly grabbed towards the void. So, in an instant, a giant axe filled with the smell of blood seemed to be teleported from the flood wilderness and slashed straight down towards the Silver Shadow Man. This axe is powerful and contains all the power of Li Feng's state in the province. Whoops! The axe blade smashed straight on the hard body of the Silver Shadow Man, and unexpectedly split its forehead into a crack visible to the naked eye. This crack did not spray blood, but spewed out countless silver particles, and the body of the Silver Shadow Man was like a kite that had lost its thread. Under the rapid movement of the pedal under his feet, he fell into the vortex of the huge black hole not far away. Li Feng understood that this was a star-swallowing move, but he didn't mean to pursue it. Instead, he looked at the axe in his hand with surprise. One axe, solve. The opponent is still a strong person at the level of Silver Shadow Man. This was still the case that Li Feng did not make full use of the symbiote god to fully evolve. Because in theory, the god of symbiote can continue to evolve by contacting the outside world, and transition this evolution to Li Feng's body. But in fact, if the symbiote god wants to grow quickly, the best way is to expand his power by fighting creatures of different genes, and then imitating their genes. Only by constantly fighting, the genes of the symbiote will become stronger and stronger, and Li Feng's genes will also be more powerful. In this regard, Li Feng is obviously not very qualified. Because of his nature, he was too lazy to fight any enemy for life and death. Or, it's Lao Tzu who punches you to death. Or, you beat Lao Tzu to death in a circle. This also caused Li Feng to be far from being able to tap the potential of the symbiote god. However, Rao is so, Li Feng's combat effectiveness is now also exaggerated. Previously, when Silver Shadow Man hit that cosmic ray on himself, the symbiote god obviously brought him a lot of help. The most direct manifestation was to convert that ray into energy and inject it into the giant axe in Li Feng's hand. This is also the key to Silver Shadow being dropped by an axe in seconds. He could not resist his own power. Next, it's your turn. Li Feng took a deep breath, and his body size grew a little again, like a demon that came out of the depths of the darkness of the universe, and his body flashed with silver-white light. He spread his perception and headed towards the black hole, not far away. Soon, he discovered that there were signs of life in this huge black hole. Li Feng did not hesitate any longer, jumped directly at full speed, and plunged into the black hole. In the eyes of Earthlings, the so-called black hole is just the most terrifying celestial body in the universe, the intersection of all physics, the ultimate existence. Because this thing can not only absorb light sources, but even absorb all substances, it is not an exaggeration to call it a bottomless pit. But apparently, the black hole incarnated by the swallowing star could not kill Li Feng now. As soon as he entered the border of the black hole, Li Feng felt a terrifying tearing force descending on every inch of flesh and blood on his body. This terrifying tearing force was like trying to tear Li Feng's body to pieces, and even wrapped in huge gravity, making it difficult for Li Feng to move an inch. Before crossing over, Li Feng had read some descriptions related to black holes in books. According to the book, if a person is swallowed by a black hole, it will be pulled into an infinitely long thin line. And this thin line can never touch the center point of the black hole, because the speed of time flowing inside the black hole is almost eternal. For this point, Li Feng was non-committal, but in this life, he completely changed this view, because at this moment, he can still move inside the black hole. This is because the god of symbiotes changed his genes the moment he entered the black hole, which made Li Feng have some similarities with the environment in the black hole, and he soon adapted to it. Those tearing forces, those terrifying gravity, disappeared under the genetic modification of the symbiote god. The symbiote god template provided by Venom is so perverted. However, what Li Feng didn't know was that the reason why he couldn't feel that time was frozen was entirely because the time gem in his body took him beyond the river of time. With the time gem, he cannot be affected by the distorted space of the black hole, and naturally can travel inside the black hole at will. In the Marvel Universe, detachment from time is the standard for almost every strong person. Changing time means changing everything. If you can't even detach the river of time, you can't even deserve the title of a strong man. Therefore, under the influence of the time gem, Li Feng easily released his perception and headed towards the deeper part of the star-swallowing body. He jumped a long distance, through the long gravitational belt of the black hole, directly into the center of the black hole, and touched the singularity. The next moment, Li Feng noticed that the surrounding scene had changed dramatically, and then a huge passage appeared in front of him that did not know where to go. Li Feng paused for a moment and broke in. Here, it's another universe. A small universe that exists only inside the star-swallowing body. And in this universe, Li Feng saw countless floating planets. At the same time, Li Feng also saw the swallowing star, one of the 5 great gods of the universe with hundreds of millions of ties connected to this world, and whose body was even similar to Jupiter. Swallow stars. If Li Feng's prediction was correct, these planets should be planets that have been devoured by stars for countless years. Black holes are just a feeding tool for swallowing stars, and this universe is the stomach of swallowing stars, and it is the true face of swallowing stars. All planets eaten by the star-swallowing star will eventually be digested by the star-swallowing star here, and increasingly used as nutrients and supplies.